every single panto is treated as its own individual production. In effect, each one is like a musical that we're putting on, and we're doing 21 of them simultaneously. So the life cycle of the process for a panto is really 18 months. The biggest thing that used to keep Sarah and I awake is, God, we're putting these shows on at winter. The weather can be a little bit tricksy, but things like snowfall or storms or just pressures on people at that time of year are the things that can actually affect your box office far greater than the title or who you put in it. No matter how many years of experience you have putting shows on, at the end of the day, it is very much like gambling. You put this show together, you put it into a theatre, and you're relying on enough people to come and witness your great work to pay for it, and it is a gamble.
Hey, just before we jump into the show, got a little favour to ask you. If you enjoy listening to our podcast, please make sure you are subscribed on the platform of your choice. Spotify, Apple, YouTube, whatever platform that might be. The more people who subscribe and the more people who like and rate the show, the more we give you an opportunity to have some great takeaways. It doesn't take you too long, and it would be a great help to us to help us grow the show. For now, that's it. Enjoy today's recording. Good morning, Steve. Thank you very much for joining us on the Business Takeaway podcast. Do you want to give a bit of introduction to who you are and a bit of a background to what finds you here today?
Yeah, absolutely, Ben. Thanks for having me on. So my name's Steve Boden. I'm joint CEO of Imagine Theatre, and we are a pantomime and family theatre production company, and we're also part of the Trafalgar Entertainment Group. And my remit is to work alongside my wife, who's the other joint CEO, to deliver pantos in 21 venues across the UK simultaneously, and also to put family entertainment out into regional venues throughout the year.
So Panto, let's start on the Panto side, right? Panto, most people who will go to Panto in the UK, and I realise this is a very UK-centric thing, will go for mid-December. But people probably won't realise Panto is, for you, an all-year-round business, right? What does Panto look like when the theatre's not performing, when the show's not on that stage?
No, you're absolutely right. Every single panto is treated as its own individual production. In effect, each one is like a musical that we're putting on, and we're doing 21 of them simultaneously. So the life cycle of the process for a panto is really 18 months. 18 months in advance of putting the curtain up, we are choosing titles in collaboration with the venues that we're putting those shows into. We're looking at trends within the market in terms of pricing strategies, marketing strategies, casting strategies. And then we're also looking at the assets that we have within the building, the infrastructure, and what we will use on each of those productions, which forms a business plan for what we might need to invest in to deliver shows 18 months down the line. And of course, at the same time, we're also prepping for the current season of shows. So in our heads, sort of now to sort of September, will be the best part of 40 odd productions that we're trying to get our head around logistically whilst delivering half of those for this season. It is a long cycle. And because we don't create shows and then just tour them around, each show is bespoke in terms of its script, in terms of its, what set it will use, the cast it will have. We treat them as individual projects.
And when you come to look at all those shows, where do you decide to put what show, right? So everyone goes, Cinderella, having worked in the theatre, Cinderella's the box office hit, right? Cinderella will make the most money, potentially. You might say otherwise now, but where do you decide what to put, and how do you know that this is going to work in which town?
So there are all those markers. You're right. There is a host of pantos that we would class as fairy tale pantos, like Cinderella, Snow White, Beauty and the Beast. And then there's your adventure pantos, your Jack the Beanstalks, or your Aladdins, or your Dick Whittingtons. And what we do is we look at, obviously, the cycle that the venue has had in previous years. So that gives us a sort of informed decision as to what might be the kind of one or two titles that we should consider next. We then look at other venues within the area and look at what titles they may have done. And then usually in collaboration with the theatres, we go, that's the right title to do. We then have conversations about, okay, well, if we do that title, what are the financial impacts? Because finance drives it all. It's show business, and I tend to be the show and Sarah tends to be the business. So we sit down and go, all right, If we do Cinderella, for example, it's a popular fairy tale title, but it does have a significantly larger principal cast than perhaps something like Jack and the Beanstalk. You've got two sisters, you've got a wicked stepmother, you've got Cinderella, but you've got Prince and his servant Dandini. So the cast size influences the likely scale of the production. What do we think we will need to spend to put a damn good version of Cinderella onto that stage? And then forecasting with the theatre, well, based on historical data and based on projections, where do we think the box office might get to on that project? And then there's just a very simple business equation that takes place as to, can we afford to put that production on at that venue, grow it to the level that the venue and ourselves require, and come out of it ready to grow again for the following year? So it's a tripartite agreement. It's the audience, it's the venue, and it's ourselves. And it's about trying to make sure that we satisfy all of those in a commercial way as well as an artistic way.
And you talk about the commercial part of Panto, right? What's the biggest risk in commercial Panto? Is it the ticket sales just like bombing at the box office? Is it the casting? where does that all sit?
It's a bit of both. But I tell you what the biggest thing that used to keep Sarah and I awake when we solely ran the company ourselves, when we weren't part of the Trafalgar Entertainment Group, is, God, we're putting these shows on at winter. And as you know, because you've done a couple of pantos with us, the weather can be a little bit tricksy. Yeah. And if you're putting, we're doing pantos on the coast, we're doing them inland, but things like snowfall or storms or just pressures on people at that time of year are the things that can actually affect your box office far greater than the title or who you put in it. We tend to say the title, we can pretty much predict where a title will get to in a particular venue because we have a track record of doing it, and that's our career. So we know that sort of, we can project on that basis. Influences of star casting can then shift it a little bit. Also influences in terms of what else is putting pressure on people's pockets will influence the outcome. But the bit that none of us can control is the weather. So that's probably one of the bits that really can mar the commercial performance of a pantomime.
And talking about COVID's moved on a little bit, but what happened with Imagine during COVID time? Because people can't go to the theatre, right?
No, it was brutal. And, that was the bit where we suddenly realised the vulnerability of what we did. No matter how many years of experience you have putting shows on, at the end of the day, it is very much like gambling. You put this show together, you put it into a theatre, and you're relying on enough people to come and witness your great work to pay for it. And it is a gamble. There is nothing that you can do about it. You can't, you cannot directly manage it, and you have to base your thoughts on what's gone before. But when COVID stops people going to the theatre, that wipes out 100% of your income and doesn't wipe out 100% of your costs, because we still have a payroll of 28, 30 staff that are full-time employed. We still have obligations for premises, for rates, for rent, for utilities. And the whole of the theatre sector, I'm sure, will tell you, and the entertainment sector, suppliers and providers, it was absolutely brutal, because without any control and at the push of a button, our entire operations were paused without anybody really knowing for how long, and at the point at which they were paused, what level of support might be available for us. And it was terrifying. And especially as business owners yourself, where it's your own money, there are no backers at that stage. It was Sarah and I. And you looked long and hard at suddenly the vulnerability of the business that you thought 5 minutes earlier was entirely stable, and whilst it was a gamble, was done with a knowledge of security, as any business has. You know where your limits are and how to make it work. And it was really tough. I mean, we had the most wonderful team of staff who supported us throughout it, just in terms of the kind of like the emotional journey and the business journey that we were on. And we still have a large proportion of those with us. But that was when we went, this is really tough. And it took 9 months before Cultural Recovery Fund was even announced. Then there was obviously an application process with no guarantee that we could get something to support the business and to keep us ticking over. Unfortunately, we were successful in both rounds 1 and rounds 2. Enabled us to retain our staff on furlough, keep the premises and the sets and the costumes and the infrastructure in place, and nursed us through very kind of light touch through to being able to get a show back on stage almost 2 years later. I mean, it was literally that long between curtain coming down in 2020 and going back up at the end of 2021.
I was just going to say, so you missed a whole season, and then it was because of, as you said, the planning. You do a 14-month. You've then got that cycle into 21, 22 almost, isn't it? So.
Correct. And there were no venues that were able to take any of the pantos in in 2020. Christmas 2020 just didn't happen. Theatres were closed. They couldn't open. We did an online version with Coventry, which was brilliant, but it wasn't sustainable really to roll that out 21 times. And we kind of had conversations with venues as to what we could do, but the venues were in the same sort of boat as well. So there was an element of joined up thinking, saying, let's not put anybody at risk. If we just sit still and stabilise and can keep going, it will come good eventually. And obviously by the time we got to Christmas 2021, we were able to carefully, with all of the restrictions that were in place in 2021, roll out a season of sorts. And the response was overwhelming. But of course, commercially, it wasn't very strong because people were still incredibly anxious. So we were putting shows on, but constantly looking at the daily reports, looking at what was happening in regions. Because even in 2021, Scotland and Wales were closed down just before Christmas. So we got a couple of pantos open for 2 weeks, but then the other 2 weeks of the run were cancelled. So that had huge financial pressures as well. So even that season was really tough. But, we came through it. And at the end of that, Trafalgar Entertainment, who had been a huge supporter of us and who were aware of what we did, were keen to talk to see whether they could actually help. Was there something that they could do with the company, with us, to provide some support? And obviously, the rest was kind of history.
Yeah, and I suppose from you two opening the Panto company, I don't know when it was finally, if it first started, but I sort of first worked with you or met you when you were doing sort of like 7 or 8 Pantos to now 21. It's, as you said, you've got 28, 30 staff. It's grown. You've got a whole business behind you now. It's not just Steve and Sarah. There's a whole lot of other people to take care of, right?
There is. And the responsibility for everybody's mortgage and everybody's families is quite huge. It's a really powerful thing. But also, the business is bigger than we are. And I think it's really important for any business owners or people who are entrepreneurs to realise everything gets to a stage where you go, okay, this is actually now bigger than we are. And it's right that we kind of look at the company's evolution rather than trying to constrain it within our own bounds. And therefore, when we created we created a different style of Panto, the digital Pantos, which I'm sure you are particularly aware of. They kind of reinvented Panto, and that's where we got a lot of interest and a lot of contracts and a lot of people coming to us saying, look, we really like what you're doing. You're evolving the brand. Can we work together, including Trafalgar? And that was a point at which we went, yeah, okay. We now need to let the business grow, and to do that, we need external support. And I think in COVID, that became acutely aware to Sarah and I that we now needed to look to grow the business. And there were opportunities that came out of COVID, but in order for us to take those opportunities, we needed a partner.
And you touched on a key point, right? Panto, for those who've never been, is such a traditional art form. It goes back to the music hall days and all that, right? But it can feel very stayy if you can go and see the same person every year in the Panto. But you brought the digital sets in. How do you sort of keep it familiar as a business, that people feel safe that they can go and see a Panto, but at the same time give them a reason to come back and not go, it's the same person in a different outfit, right?
Yeah. And I tell you, there's a lot of joined up kind of bits to that question, because Panto has only survived as long as it has done because people treat it as something that they feel proud of. They feel that they have a sense of ownership. They did it as a kid with their parents, grandparents. They want to pass that on through generations. You discover that people kind of access Panto at blocks of time in their lives. As an audience, they'll go as a kid perhaps once or twice. Then they may go, when they're a parent. Then they may go as a grandparent. They may then go with extended family members, but they kind of tend to dip in and out of it. So there is always a constant churn of Panto goers. But Panto has survived because it has evolved. So when we look at things that will keep Panto alive, technology is a huge part of that now. And like it or loathe it, screen technology is a huge part of everyday life. And it's interesting to see that there is, initiatives now to curb young people's engagement with social media platforms. But the phone and the tablet and the PC has become an integral part of their access to entertainment. So part of the thinking of the evolution of Panto from Imagine's point of view and my point of view with Sarah was that we can't get away from that. But why don't we try and find a world where we can embrace the technology that people are feeling familiar with and put it onto stage in a way that allows us to evolve the staging of Panto. So rather than having 2 lorry loads of, wooden canvas driving around to each venue to try and, make a very spectacular but material heavy production, is there a world where we can create something that's more exciting, reduce our carbon footprints somewhat, which is a huge part of what Imagine are doing, and also create something new and different to push the art form forward. A world of moving images where you don't have to have a front cloth and a full scene and change the set whilst you've got your front cloth scene on, which artistically is quite limiting in terms of the narrative. but develop it so that every scene is full set and that we can do something really magical and spectacular with the backgrounds and the environment that the show is performed in. So that was kind of like our kind of stamp on the industry and the evolution of the art form.
And commercially, is that cost-wise? Because a panto set can last 20, 30. God, I've probably lit some sets that are 40, 50 years old. And you go, is there a bit of cloth there? I can't really see.
Was there any paint on this one?
Is there any paint on this? There's a bit of glitter in the top right-hand corner. But do you know what I mean? From a commercial point of view, how does that stack up from a digital set to going for a different set? Because there are different costs and everything to that.
There are different costs, but you look at kind of the whole picture. We have a huge 60,000 square foot unit up in Coventry that's full of costume scenery, takes up a huge amount of space, and the maintenance of the traditional sets, keeping them looking spick and span and tip top, has a cost, has a material cost, has a footprint, carbon footprint. The element of the creativity around the digital shows, they cost about as much to design and create. The running costs are slightly more, but then we're not transporting as much kit around the country in terms of physical set elements. And therefore, from a supplier's point of view, we're able to tap into local suppliers of screens, LED screens. We've talked about, do we amass them? Do we buy our own stock of them? Should we store them? At the moment, the tech's evolving so fast, as I'm sure you know, more than anyone. The speed at which everything evolves in that world means that you kind of say, well, at what point is it right that we draw a line in the sand and say, okay, now we can invest because the tech that's out there is good enough for us to be able to use for multiple years? Or do we say, no, we don't, we just want to hire that because we don't want to necessarily store it, maintain it, and do all that? So they cost more in terms of the physical infrastructure that's required to get them up on stage in the first instance than a traditional set might. But from the running costs point of view, when you're looking at a big number one panto set that's 2 or 3 Arctics, load of scenery, and then all the lighting and everything that goes with it, it's not of that scale 365 days a year when we're storing it in a warehouse. So we're saving in terms of the amount of floor space that we're using. Potentially we can move them around easier because the actual show files themselves are traveling on a memory stick or they're sat on a cloud. All we're doing is taking some framing away with us and accessing screens at a local venue basis.
How's the audience taken to that very different panto?
Really strong. One of the things that underpinned every bit of evolution of panto in the past and now is that the purists still feel that they're watching something that relates to what they experienced panto as. And we were really clear that there's still a place for paint, glitter, canvas, steps, and similarly with costume, that there's still a need for the sparkles, the bright range of colours, the glitter, the sequins, the impact that all of those elements bring together. What was interesting about the digital shows, which I don't think I'd quite grasped when we conceived them, was that each of those elements of panto has an energy. Your cast have an energy, your costumes have an energy, your lighting has an energy, your music, your sound. There's an energy from all of that. Your set, your traditional set, has an energy if it's painted, but that energy is only translating to the audience based on how good the lighting is and how old the set is and how it looks. What we've amassed from the digital world is that there's an energy that comes from the screens as well, and that can be shaped and that can be honed around the action on the stage. So your moods that you're creating with your actors, the moment when Cinderella's ticket has been torn up and she's left on her own and we would normally darken everything in. On a traditional set, whilst you can recolour it with stage lighting and change the mood with just the lighting, we can actually further develop that with detail on the set that can change to support that mood as well. So we can change the colour palette of the set. We can pull out certain elements. We can really, change the moods on the scenery in a way that we can't do on a traditional canvas and wood set. So that's, I think, we've enhanced the artistic delivery whilst keeping everything in balance and provided an extra level of energy on the stage for the performance.
And when you first sat down and said, hey, let's go and do something different, that must have been a big commercial risk. Was it or did you see it as a, hey, we're doing it somewhere? I think where do you, Leicester? Was it Leicester?
Croydon. We did it Croydon first of all. Yeah, put it into the new, when Croydon was being reopened, it was kind of like it was a meeting of two moments. Croydon were looking for a new panto for their new venue, and we were looking for a new venue to try a commercial panto in that didn't necessarily constrain it to a proscenium arch and fly tower. So there were two boxes being ticked at that point.
But commercially, it was a commercial risk, was it?
Yeah. I mean, it's like creating any show. I mean, we class the risk as lower because at least we're putting on an art form that we know. And we know, all right, regardless of how we stage that show, we know that if we put a production of Cinderella on in Wickham or Reading or wherever we were going to put it on, we know roughly what we would expect it to cost, but also what we're likely to see it take based on data that's, we've got and that theatres have got. So the only kind of difference there was the risk on creating a show digitally that was going to cost a bit more, but was untested in front of an audience. And of course, that is not necessarily in the impact year when you do it first, but it's what happens subsequently. Because if we'd done it, spent a lot of money developing it, audiences and feedback from the crits and everything had been, Panto's great, but oh my God, I had a headache when I left the building because I'd been looking at screens for 2.5 hours. That was a major concern. And we did a lot of research, finding the right partners to kind of answer those questions before we rolled it off. But yeah, that was one of the risks. It was only when we got it all on stage, got it put up and saw it lit and saw it with all the great animation work that our partners at Pixelux had worked on with Mark Walters, who's a traditional set designer, so we had both worlds covered, that we went, actually, no, this is going to work. This is a really interesting evolution of the art form.
And I suppose the risk actually would be year 2, isn't it? It's because the first year there'll be the novelty factor of, oh, I've never seen a digital Panto, I'll go and see that. And then it's the trying to put it on year 2 to see if the audience has come back. Did you pick the Pantos? Did you go, well, let's do was it Cinderella you did first? Because that's a safe, so you go the safe commercial bet.
Yeah, we did. There was an element of, right, we commissioned 6, of which we've created 4 so far, and there's 2 more to come. And the first 2 were what we could call the fairy tale characters. So we did Cinderella and Beauty and the Beast. And then the second 2 were the adventures, Jack and the Beanstalk and Aladdin. I think there's much more of a satisfying development of the tech on an adventure story, because you can do vistas, you can do changing landscapes. Aladdin, for example, the flying carpet sequence is a joy because you can take the audience with you on that great journey. So I think, artistically, we've had 4 very different titles to challenge, and each time we've challenged the tech and advanced it, we've made more headway. Part of the original restriction that we had to place on ourselves was the opportunities are endless. We actually just need to define what are the bits that we want to focus on. Otherwise, you find that the design team are going off down one avenue and getting hugely excited about what they can achieve. The lighting team are going, oh my God, with all this pixel tape all over the set and all of the tech that's available for us to now integrate into this is fantastic. The video team are going, well, if you're going to do that, we can do this. We can then time code everything and then, put it into the music and the lighting and then videos, So actually we had to very quickly in Cinderella go, all right, let's find the moments that we want to focus on. We want to focus on the transformation, because that's where all of these elements that every department could bring strengthens the offering from what we could do on a traditional set. And the other bit was an artistic decision on telling a bit of the story that you wouldn't normally tell and how the tech can support us. And interestingly, on Cinderella, that was the return journey when Cinderella runs out of the palace. And normally she goes and then you only see her again the next morning. We said, let's follow her journey. Let's see the decomposing of the carriage back to the pumpkin. Cinderella going from all of the riches back to the rags. Let's explore the reverse transformation as well. So that was an artistic decision. So, we were focusing in particularly on those artistic elements to stop everybody's minds from running wild, because that's sometimes what tech allows you to do.
Yeah, and for traditional Panto, Cinderella's transformation is usually a big scene change you can't do anything with and hide and all that, right? So it's a difficult journey. Comedy, we sort of talk about moving things forward. I mean, I remember going to doing some of my very early Pantos a few years ago. We won't talk about when it was, but some of the comedy gags that we put in would not get away with now, and you wouldn't put them on stage, right? So how do you sort of keep the comedy part of it moving forward, but sensitive to the present
comedy
world and comedy and what's appropriate, what can't be said and what can't be said? How does that work?
It's really difficult, and you have to be constantly working collectively as a team to say, okay, what is the right way to tell this story to a modern audience? What are the things that audiences respond to? Comedy, I think, has changed the most, but also by virtue of the fact that a lot of the comedians that were in the Pantos of the 80s, the 90s and the early 2000s aren't around anymore because their act has moved on and they have moved on off the mortal coil. So, the whole kind of what is comedy, what is celebrity has evolved. What that has allowed us to do is to find other ways of still delivering that. We've found that comedy doesn't necessarily need to be a series of gags from a stand-up comedian who may have material that's no longer suitable. It can be about situations. What I think we're doing is spending a lot more time working with writers and with the performers who are going to be on stage to say, okay, there's visual comedy, which is timeless. There's sketches and routines that are timeless. So perhaps let's refocus on the stand-up inappropriateness of comedians delivering jokes that perhaps don't reach all the audience, and focusing on the comedy that is mass appeal and is really aimed at everybody. I think our pantos at Imagine are rooted in story, but with the fluidity and the freedom to allow every gag and bit of comedy to be woven into it, so long as it fits into the story and has a purpose and is also accessible to all. Yes, you can have a little gentle bit of innuendo that perhaps the kids don't necessarily go, but it's not put in because it has to be. It's because it feels that it flows out of a situation of writing, of structure, that means that it is acceptable, because we are amusing and playing to 3 to 103. So we have to bear that in mind. But what we don't want, and what we spend a lot of time with our creatives and with our directors and performers, is for any moments where anybody feels uncomfortable. And uncomfortable audience members aren't good for the industry, but it's also people's sensitivity to the world. And we're a much more joined up world. We're a much more diverse culture. It's really important that everybody feels that they can find their place in Panto with their family and not feel in any way that they're being mocked, made fun of. And we want them to come back. So why would you do that? So I think, our journey has very much shaped or has shaped the industry from our point of view, but I think has also differentiated us from other producers. And that's fine. There's a gap in the market for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, the two that I've done for you, there's been the gags, there's been the few jokes that the adults will get, and not the kids, and that's fine. But that's fine. They're within a tasteful, really tasteful flowing sequence. Do you know what I mean? Or they're a visual gag or something, and there we go.
And that's timeless, and it's funny for all generations.
Yeah,
so
and you want to get, as you said, you're 3 to 103. You want Granny laughing and the kids laughing because Granny is laughing, but they don't understand why Granny's laughing, right? That's
but they enjoy the fun of the environment.
Yeah. And sort of talking about those comics who've moved on, do you see from a commercial point of view the celebrity casting as the big vehicle now, or was that because it felt like sort of 10, 15 years ago, it was every single celebrity was, I was 5th on X Factor 4 years ago, and I was still the big name. Just no disrespect to anyone who was 5th on X Factor 4 years ago, but do you need that now, or is actually the Panto standing up on their own sort of 2 feet sort of thing?
From a business commercial point of view, part of our drive is to actually stop the audiences from going to the poster to see who's in it before they decide to book. So building brands, building strong relationships with towns, with local actors who perhaps become the repeaters. So you have a kind of perhaps a comic or a dame who outside of their venue may mean nothing, but because you've placed them in venue for a number of years, the audience feel attached to them and feel that there's something there that they love. They're then less focused on who's in it, because there are less celebrities. Celebrity isn't what it used to be, and it's really hard to keep the celebrity profile as the driver. But also commercially, your next Panto the following year is only as good as your last one, and often, without any plan, your profile might be in a part or might just not be very good. They might be very good at telling gags, or they may be very good at singing, but that doesn't make them a very good actor and doesn't make them a good Panto performer. And all of that then comes into play and impacts you the following year. So if we can create a brand of Panto that the audience are going, the dame's back or the comic's back, which is the same team that did last year, the digital set's back, which was part of the messaging around devolving the digital sets because in effect, they became the star. It just takes the pressure off the commercials of profile casting. You don't have to think, God, who we're going to put in there. That's not to say that we won't still use profile casting, but it means that we can focus the people who can do it in the right pantos and not expose them or the production to any shortcomings.
Yeah, I mean, up at Llandudno, where I've done the last couple of years with John and Simon, when John comes on, he gets a round of, he's like the celebrity. Do you know what I mean?
Correct.
He's had a very good career and everything like that. I'm not playing it down, but he's not a celebrity
he's not a telly show or in a soap opera or anything like that. No, and wouldn't mean very much outside of Llandudno or the other venues where he's performed. And that's exactly a great example of us investing in people, in performers who get the art form, rather than investing in profile and hoping that they'll be good enough, getting the benefit of a load of bums on seats, but then getting an audience perhaps leaving going, they don't look like I remember them, or they're not as good as they are on telly, or do you know what? And that's not what you need. You don't need those questions. I'd rather people left going, wow, wasn't that transformation scene brilliant? God, the set was fantastic. Oh, I laughed myself silly when the guys fell over in the slosh scene. All of that is the sort of conversation that we need to get the audiences to leave, because that's what then spreads the word. And interestingly, It's those sort of conversations from an audience that are actually the things that drive ticket sales. It's all endorsement. It's all recommendation. It's less about, oh, I saw a poster hanging up telling me to come see it. Oh, my mate's been to see that, said it was brilliant. Why don't we see if we can find a night to go? That's what we want. And I think that's probably an engagement with audiences that is new, almost post-pandemic. The opportunity to say to audiences at the end of the show, did you enjoy that? Yeah, great. Well, get your phones out, take some photos. We're going to do a finale song. So let's celebrate it. And we look forward to seeing you next year. And that's, that's putting the focus on the whole production rather than just who was in it.
It's interesting you say about that sort of recommending, like when you go to the reviews of the theatre and you go and see on the website the trailer or whatever, and I've done this with London, no, having done that, you see people tagging their friends, you should go, I went and saw it the other night, you should go. And that's a marketing that 10 years ago, imagine you would never had that route to market, right? To get those people.
Exactly. So many producers have now seen the power of embracing the tech. And I get it. If you're sitting in a play in the West End, the last thing you want is to get the phone out and take photos at the front. I get all that. I understand that. It doesn't mean that it's one rule for the entire art form, but certainly for Panto, it's about getting the community engaged with it. And that tech plays a massive part. It makes it harder commercially because what we're seeing is then there's a lot of pressure on last minute sales. People are perhaps less eager to commit in advance because they've got so much choice and because they want to get those endorsements. It does make it a little bit of a sort of squeaky bum moment from a producer's point of view when you're going, okay, every year on year for the last 10 years, the number of advance sales has dropped slightly and the number of sales that have amassed in the second half of the year and into the run has increased. And that then just makes it harder. But again, your experience and your knowledge comes into play there to know when it's fine to just go, we'll be okay. Or when you go, okay, actually, no, we do need to jump in and support this campaign in some sort of, extended way.
On that pace, sort of like 10, 15 years ago, you'd have been, I'm going to pick random figures, but at 50% of box office by August, for example, whereas you're now perhaps October. Is that sort of the seismic shift you're seeing?
Yeah, it is. It's a seismic shift. People don't like to part with their cash early. I think that's the environment that we're in. So I think global economics play a large part of that, and messaging on media, because of course the downside of media is that everybody feels the eternal pressure of global as well as national problems. And that also affects their confidence, which we didn't perhaps have quite so intense 10 years ago. So I think that people's booking patterns have changed, but it's not just us. It's industry. It's not just Panto, it's industry wide. I think it's interesting that statistically London venues are doing very well, but they're doing very well by virtue of everybody having tickets on offer so that you feel you're getting a bargain. That means that everybody then has to jump on the bargain cart in London. Otherwise, you're missing out. If your theatre next door is offering you discounted tickets, then you have to be in the same, on the day market. They too have seen a massive increase in the week and on the day sales. And I think we're feeling that in the regions. And of course, we don't have the benefit in the regions of those mass ticketing platforms that can do. And it's about putting a product that you think is accessible to as many people as possible by your clever pricing strategy from the outset, rather than pricing it all high and then having to discount, because discounting is a hard message in the regions. And it doesn't just affect the Panto, it then affects the rest of the theatre's programme throughout the year. So we are very much trying to weather the storm and not discount, but support the theatre's other programming, because the Panto, as we touched on the commercials earlier, the Panto in all venues, commercial or subsidised, is a massive player in their seasonal financial performance, but also the evolution of an audience to come and support the theatre for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in a venue, that we used to talk about the Panto as the thing that made us not break even, or would cover the losses of all the other shows, essentially, right? And so get that wrong, that's a big kick in the teeth for any Panto or any venue up and down the land.
It is. It's all about the financials. It's about your box office performance, but more importantly, it's about all your secondary sales. Those are a massive part of the theatre's success. And, 2 shows a day, 6 days a week, 4-5 weeks of the year increases exponentially the earning potential of that venue. So it is hugely powerful.
And as a lighting designer, those flashing ones are bloody annoying, but never mind.
Yes.
I remember lighting one show where we had a beautiful Cinderella all closed down, and in the tech it was beautiful, it was really dark and mysterious, and then the first dress and the whole auditorium's lit up like a Christmas tree.
And they're so powerful.
They are.
They're because all of the tech that we're using has been miniaturized and shoved in a plastic stick, but it's still hugely powerful. And there needs to be that's another project one day.
Make them all dimmable so I can control them.
Yeah, that's right.
Anyway, next sort of question on that commercial point. So people, you've worked in it, I've worked in this world. How does it work with the theatre? Is it, imagine just turn up and go, right, here's the show, this is going to cost it this much? Is it a theatre come to you and pay this? Do you know what I mean? How does that sort of, without getting too specific? But
no, absolutely. And I think, again, like we've talked about the product evolving, I think the engagement and interaction with theatres has changed, because gone are the days where you had huge departments of staff, even in receiving houses, ready to support the delivery of the panto. Most of them are now just, a very tight set of staff in venue, and a lot of freelancers and casuals who will come in and support as necessary. So the theatres, a lot of the theatres that we produce in tend to see their panto as an opportunity to be creative. And what we clocked on really early, and certainly what I did, is actually we're a creative industry. So it's in our interest as a resident show that will perhaps be there for 3 or 4 or 5, 6 weeks to try and provide some opportunities for creativity from venue staff who are just constantly receiving and not getting to be creative, which, let's face it, most of us in the technical theatre world and indeed the artistic and production world went into the business to be a bit creative. I think we've seen our relationships with theatres become partnership, and that's really exciting. It means that we're then creating shows that everybody has a vested interest in, and that's important when you're looking at the commercials, because there's no good us saying, well, we're going to deliver you this great show, but your job is to market it, because that doesn't help anybody, even if the financial incentive is such that it's in their interest to, unless they know what they're marketing and feel that they have something that they're proud of. They don't necessarily understand the impact of the marketing campaign. So, we work at different levels. Some shows are on very simple commercial deals, which are shares of the box office. Others are collaborative, where there's a kind of first call, second call share of the profits. Some of them are an investment basis, where we invest, they invest, and everybody benefits in the kind of the ratio of their investment in the riches of the show. The best outcome is one where everybody goes in with an open policy at the start and says, there's nothing here for us to hide. This is what we need to achieve. That's what you need to achieve. So therefore, the brief of this project is, you need to do that. We need to do that. How do we best shape that so that we at least achieve what we require, but we also acquire, beyond the commercials, we acquire buy-in and personal development of staff who are all working on this project.
And I suppose, some theatre people I've worked with over the years, money is a very bad word to talk about. We don't talk. We're doing it for the art. We're doing it for the love. We're doing it because this is a piece I've always wanted to do for 30 years. But it is actually sometimes important to be that frank about it and go, the theatre needs 100 grand over this period of time to make this money. That's what we need to do, and that's what we need to hit. And that's actually quite a good place to be, right? To be that transparent.
Don't hide it. I think it's much easier to craft a solution to a problem if everybody's open and transparent, because the problem is we've got 5 weeks. We need to maximise our return in it. The solution is let's put on a panto. Who, how, what, why, when, then naturally leads from that point. But the more open and everybody is at the outset, and it changes year to year, and that's the other great thing about having relationships with theatres over multiple years, means that you can say, well, okay, where do you need to be in 5 years on your panto? Where do we need to be? What's the strategy that sits behind all that? And, that is where the business bit of show business comes into play. Putting on a show is great if somebody else is paying for it. When you're paying for it, you need to make sure that you can satisfy the artistic opportunity, but more importantly, make sure that everybody gets to live another day.
So then that would go back into that flow of which shows you do, so you're going to start really well with Cinderella, and then takes the second year might be a trickier show because in 5 years, and just work it that way.
So you plot your journey out and you say, well, where do we need to get to? What needs to deliver that? Well, that then dictates the order that we do the shows in, so that we know when we land a show in 5 years' time, it's likely to deliver the box office return that we all need it to do. It's no different from any other business from that point of view, developing product and putting it into market.
And Imagine is, as you said, does 21 shows this? I don't know how many you're heading to this year.
Yeah. Why do we do that?
But how do you, as you said, it's almost like 21 small businesses almost, isn't it? Because you're talking about a big business, but then each one might be 150 miles away from the next one, and you've got a team in that place. How do you sort of grow the business while still trying to keep it local and family and that, but at the big cog you need to keep going in the background?
it's incremental changes. There's a critical mass in all of this where you say, okay, some shows are going to make more than others. We hope they're all going to make some money, but some years they don't. And it's about saying, okay, what is the critical mass that the current workforce can cope with? What does it then need to expand to look like to enable us to take the next step? So I suppose we've got a warehouse full of scenery and costumes and props and special effects. We also have a fantastic team of marketeers, administrators, technicians, production managers, all within the organization. So the diversification of what that team can do outside of Panto is the interesting bit. And it also challenges them, having a team that has all the core people that you require to put on a show and market a show and administer and finance a show, but then knowing in your company structure where you can then expand that model by bringing in part-time or freelance to support it. So I think from our growth point of view, it's not all about adding more pantos to it. It's about diversification into other parts of the industry and how we can support either as general management or as let's put out another tour of a different product throughout the year, or what can we use those panto infrastructure for outside of Christmas panto, Easter panto, or other bits of the jigsaw.
And I suppose that's the phrase in the UK used to be a dog's not just for Christmas, right? I suppose a panto imagines not just for Christmas. And that's what you've got to look at and go, we've got 5 weeks of the year, 6 weeks of the year when it's absolute hell. And then the rest of the year, what can we do to those resources? It's utilising it.
It is utilising the skill set, personal development of the staff, and also being part of a group such as Trafalgar actually opens that door a lot wider and makes those opportunities to kind of, move concurrently in a different direction whilst maintaining the core of Panto much easier to deliver. All that is, what Sarah and I, in terms of the vision of the travel that we're going in, are looking at, those opportunities, of which there are plenty. And it's certainly not getting any easier out there in terms of, running venues, managing venues, people prepared to take risks and saying, okay, we will give that a go. You're not seeing a huge amount of new product coming onto the market. And that's where it makes it feel more important that we can put security back into theatres by saying, okay, we can, because as an economy of our scale, we can perhaps give you a better resource for your buck than you might ordinarily have been able to get from a smaller organisation. And what's also interesting is there's a place for all sizes of panto producers. And that's the other fascinating thing. We all talk, we all work together. We'll support the smaller producers as the bigger producers used to support us when we were smaller. But I think it's a much more open. The biggest change I suppose I've seen is that producers of panto are prepared to talk and support each other because there's plenty of space in the market for all of us.
I suppose you're not competing against them. You might be in nearby towns, but the panto that's 200 miles away from another town doing panto or big one, it's no harm to you to explain this is what you're struggling with or seeing, right?
Yeah. And looking at trends and looking at, and talking about people that you've used and the good, the bad and the indifferent and, all that, like any business, it's useful to know.
We talked before we started recording, you sort of said you're on the downward spiral towards November. How does Steve change? Steve must change from November and December Steve to January or January to October Steve. How do you adapt? How do you work with the business? How do you stay in touch with people in those different times?
It's cyclical. We're an 18-month cycle and you get used to how those cycles roll. Sarah and I very much know, as do the rest of the team, that once you get towards August, September, you're working 6 or 7 days a week and it is relentless. And it's about motivating the team. It's about giving the team the support that they need. The longer you do any job, the more you're aware of the pitfalls, but you're also aware of how many things go right. And you're also aware of things that you perhaps need to inform others on the journey to watch out for. So it's a different sort of pressure. I think for us, it's about managing our team, putting support in place to reassure them, because we've got, various, because we always say we're custodians of the art form of panto and producing generally, but particularly panto. We have to just have it in a good place to hand over to the next generation. And that next generation are already coming into our company and we're nurturing them and we're taking advice and we're sounding and listening to the things that they can bring to develop it. And it's about providing a family framework, family in the loose sense, that everybody feels that they have a voice that can be heard to enable them to keep the thing running while we look strategically at the direction of travel. And, the Steve that you see in January is just a lot grayer and a lot more tired. But then we look at where strategically we can move, what the financial challenges are and what the artistic challenges are. And those are both exciting. And then we start again. And we do a lot of reflecting on what's gone before. You can always learn. You never stop learning. You never stop learning in terms of how to, do a gag better on stage, how to create something better, how to finance or budget something tighter, how to distribute resource in a different way. You never stop learning and challenging and trying. And that's the world that we're trying to set up. I think we were saying the other day, I think we're probably unique in the sense that we have this warehouse in Coventry that has every single bit of kit and people needed to put on a show. We cast in-house, we contract in-house, we market in-house, we design in-house, we have costumes in-house, set in-house. So actually, the entire operation is sat under one roof, whereas a lot of producers in Panto and elsewhere have a production office, and then they go out to other areas where they have either their own kit or they outsource it and bring it in. I think we're probably unique because we've got the entire gamut under our roof.
But that's been built from 10, 15, 20 years of building that up from you and Sarah sat in a front room.
That's right.
Building it.
Right? Yeah. The evolution of the journey of Imagine has been 25 years. Sarah and I took it over in the mid 2008. I think we took it over. God, you get me to try and work that out. I think it was about 2000. When did we take over Imagine? 2009. I was a year out. So in 2009, when we took over Imagine from its kind of previous incumbents that both Sarah and I were working for, we'd amassed our kind of first wave of knowledge on how to do it, and we could see where we thought we could take it. But it's taken the kind of period post that to actually hone it in and develop it into what it is now.
And if you went back to the Steve of 2009, Steve and Sarah, would you think you would have got it to where you've got it to now?
Absolutely not. No. And I think that's what's exciting about it. I think we have been slow and steady wins the race. There wasn't a race for us to win, but certainly just taking it brick by brick and doing something and then looking at the change of the output of that input change, just then reflecting on it and saying, okay, let's then do this, has, I think, been able to provide the growth that we've seen. Just gradually going, okay, this is really interesting. The market's responding to this. We're seeing a shift in this direction. Why don't we change that and see whether that, develops, grows the company, changes the response from an audience, puts more money into the bank, makes the bank manager sit up and go, oh, okay, it's not such a risk as it perhaps looks when your entire bank balance goes to zero and minus over Christmas, and then in January, February goes back up again.
And as we talked about a bit earlier, technology moving forward, do you feel, I mean, I'm a creative for you, and I come in and say I need more money, Dave, for my show to make it look more spectacular. Do you feel there is that sort of arms race every year of you being pushed and budgets being pushed and people going, we can do more, give us more money, but you have a commercial point going, but yeah, we can't afford to do that. Do you feel the audiences are expecting that as well, that it's evolution every year?
I think so. I think the audiences have an expectation in terms of visual and sound reproduction, which is greater than it used to be by virtue of what they access on their tech. But I think at its heart is good storytelling. And we always say when we're kind of looking at the measure of a production and we see the first draft of the script and we're talking about it, if you stripped off all the bells and whistles, would this show still work? And I think from an Imagine Panto, from a narrative point of view and from a casting point of view, the answer is yes. And therefore, you go from that point to say, well, look, everything that we add to this will only enhance what is already good. We're not saying, God, without that turn and without, the script is paper thin, we need that. We know that the actual nuts and bolts of what we're trying to put on is robust. Therefore, that helps us define the framework of lighting, set, special effects, without worrying that, oh God, this show's dreadful, therefore we have to, cover it in glitter to make it passable. That's just, we don't get ourselves into that position. We know that the core is going to be good. Therefore, in this 500-seat venue, which ultimately will define the parameters both physically and commercially, what that Panto will be, we can say, well, we can put on this level of performance, which the audience won't question as being mediocre. They'll go, that was exactly what we expected. And when you look at what we paid, yes, we got a bang for our buck.
And what's the hardest? Has there ever been a case where there's been a hard decision where commercially this is the right thing, but creative, there's a different answer? And how do you then face that challenge? Sometimes you go, oh, it'd be amazing, we can do this thing. And you go, yeah, we haven't got the money. But from the creative side, I've got the two heads, the business and the creative side. I want to do the creative, but sometimes the business won't. But
the hardest thing is getting all those voices into a space to allow everybody to be heard. And I suppose that's one of the hard things when you're a producer producing multiple shows, is there's not enough time in the year for all those voices to be heard, and therefore an element of the creative decisions have already had to be prescribed. But I think what we're also aware of is that we're employing creatives like yourself, like directors, like choreographers. We actually want to give them a chance to be creative and to know what the budget is, but also to have the freedom to go, okay, well, you're thinking that we need to do that. I'm just wondering if actually with that we could do this, and that might be more interesting. And it's providing those levels of conversations, and it's also saying, okay, if that idea requires us to invest now, but we will see the return of that in 5, 6, 7 years' time, and we can still amortize the cost of that and justify spending more on it at the outset. There's also a place for those. It's about having those channels of communication, which as an industry we sometimes struggle with, both internally but also externally. We are communicators by virtue of our art form, but internally we don't necessarily communicate collectively as efficiently as we could do. And for us, it's about just allowing platforms for all those voices to be heard, and for people to be feeling that they are empowered enough and not constrained by budget, but empowered enough to be creative whilst being mindful of the constraints, but then how those constraints could be overcome with a business head.
Probably for about five or six different answers to this question. But if Steve could have a commercially successful Panto season or a critically successful Panto season, after commercially, you've paid all the bills, all that sort of things, which is more important?
God, it's really difficult. We've had some brilliant artistic, critical reviews of shows that have lost thousands and thousands of pounds. Ultimately, the money is what will allow the platform for the critical reception to come from. That's perhaps a transition from when I started, where we all go into it going, come on, let's put on the very best show we can, spend as much as we need to, with a second eye to the commercials that sit behind that. And so that's the benefit of working with your wife and your sparring partner who has a very strong understanding of the industry, but from a very different perspective, means that you actually wrestle out and tease out what the importance of the differentials are, and then you find a ground that makes both artistic and commercial success. My head is now much more rooted in the commercial success being the thing that underpins any opportunity to be artistically successful moving forward. Was that an answer?
No, it's a great answer, but it's sometimes, as I said, I started in more commercial, more about doing the product on stage, and it's all about the product on the stage and not worrying about the business. Now I'm in a multi-billion-dollar business. I'm now like, when I look at Panto in London, now I'm going, oh, it's not many in the audience now. I don't know how commercially this works tonight. Do you know what I mean? And so it's your brain just works in a different way, and it's just interesting to see how you probably started out on the artistic side, and now as you said, you're now worrying about 30 people's mortgages and all those things that go with that, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. So you do it, and it's you have to love what you do, and you have to have a vision as to what you want to do. So I think it's inevitable that most people who enter the industry look at it, if they're creative or want to produce, from the artistic lens. I think that's always the right starting point, because by doing that, you then amass an understanding of how much things cost. And then with that knowledge, you then understand very quickly how much you need to take. And then wisdom and experience over the years tells you where those boundaries are, and that's never going to work. Or to make it work, you'd have to do that. And that's then the art of producing. But I think, you have to always have an element of, the digital Pantos was very much driven artistically. It made no sense commercially, as Sarah often reminds me, and she's right. But what it does is it allows you to refine and actually allows you to find the route through the digital Pantos that makes them commercially successful.
Taking away the commercial, going back to the artistic side, for me, the moment that I get excited by Panto is the first dress rehearsal with the full band, the lights, the curtain goes up, or the first night when the curtain goes up, the audience scream. What's the bit that makes you go, this is all worth the grey hair, the stress, the sleepless nights?
It's definitely in Panto, hearing an audience absolutely lapping it up and loving it. The hardest thing for me as a creative and a producer, and a lot of people can cope with it, I can't, is the nerves around the first night. I would rather be anywhere and question myself every year, why do I want to put myself through this to have my homework marked by 1,000 people? The difference is that you very quickly realize that those 1,000 people aren't there to mark your homework. They're there to have a damn good time, and you've employed a brilliant team around you who are absolutely there to make sure that everybody has a great time, including themselves. And once you get your headspace into that, you go, yeah, actually, we've delivered in spades. There is nothing here that we haven't thought about. There's nothing here that isn't calculated. There's nothing here that isn't, artistically and commercially sensible. But as a creative, you still go, why? Because it's hard to have your homework marked. But you have to.
I used to hate, producers used to put me in the middle of the central of the stall so you could never get out. And as a lighting designer, you're sitting the first night and something goes wrong and you can't get out without causing a fuss. I used to hate it. I used to say to them, give me a standing ticket, give me somewhere the farthest corner, but it's dreadful.
Yeah.
Panto can sometimes have a bit of a negative view in the industry. Some people, you're doing Panto again. Or some people used to say to me, what do you think sort of people should understand against that statement that makes Panto great? What is that thing?
It stems from training. There's a woeful lack of mention of Panto in any professional training at drama school. One of the first jobs that any performer will do when they graduate is Panto. That doesn't mean they have to love it. That doesn't mean that they have to continually look to fill their diary with it. But it is fundamentally one of the biggest employers in our sector. And I think that's where we just need to make inroads into just saying it's not anything to look down at. In fact, there is no other part of our sector that's as intense and as hard as Panto. It's physically hard. It's artistically tough. It demands a lot of your time at a point of the year where you might want to spend time with your family. But my goodness, it gives you a great grounding in our profession. And it's almost looked at in drama school as, well, we won't mention Panto because it's actually, it's not important. It's actually really important because it's the bit that allows the theatres to stay open to do what they do. And it inevitably, at some point in your career, if you're serious about keeping your career going as long as possible, going to need your attention. So and I've seen a change. People are much more appreciative and much more engaging with it. And there isn't that looking down the lens at it as a lower art form. I think that is a change that I've seen in the 20 odd years that I've been doing it.
I think I interviewed somebody a few months ago who they provide performers for corporate events. And then she was talking about the transferable skills of an actor, right? And she said there's nothing more resilient than an actor. And if you've done three shows a day on Christmas Eve and you're driving at 6 o'clock to go and see your family 4 hours away to get to Christmas Day on your one day off, that's a training that you can't train anywhere else.
No, you're absolutely right. And that will put you in good stead for a lot of other parts of your career in this industry.
And outside of the career, if you go that route as well, if you would start again tomorrow, is there something you would do differently?
Worry less, because knowledge and experience provides you with all the tools that at first you makes you brave. I'd probably be brave with the knowledge, but no, I don't think so. I think it's all about right place, right time, and taking sensible steps that that if they don't work, you don't lose your shirt. You have to just go. There's nothing wrong with being, taking your time and working hard. Hard work is ultimately what makes any business entrepreneur successful. You have to work hard. It's not 9 till 5. It's all consuming. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you're bothered by it, you will have it going through your head a lot of the time. And that's when you go, okay, my hard work, if I take my energy and move it into a business and I see success, I don't mind doing that. So I don't think there is anything. It's just, knowledge, wisdom, experience is what makes a second pass through it again, if I had that knowledge, a little less stressful.
And finally, it's called the Business Takeaway Podcast. Do you have a golden rule, golden lesson you say to this team at Imagine or you live by with doing the shows?
Golden rule. I think the golden rule is very much from Imagine's point of view of remember that what we're putting on is something that we want everybody to feel proud of. Don't necessarily perceive each project as something that you have to micromanage. Free yourself up from the micromanagement. Give yourself a broad look and make sure that the team that you empower to do the job are allowed to do that. I think the golden rule is try and shy away from the mentality of it's just easy if I do it myself. Actually let people in, let them take something, use the skills that you have. Otherwise, when you're doing 20 shows simultaneously, it's very easy for many members of our staff to get immersed in the detail. That was a weird answer.
No, it's It's a great answer. So we finish all the podcasts with some rapid fire questions. As I said at the start, some of these are not rapid fire, some of them can be, but we'll see where we go. Are you an Apple or Android person?
Android.
Social media platform of choice?
I'm probably the least social media savvy, but it's probably Facebook.
Are you a beach or city break person when you're not in Panto?
Beach, 100%.
And if you're travelling, do you travel first class or save the money?
First class. No, it depends which the project is and whether Mrs. B is approving the expenses. It depends. It depends.
Aladdin's carpet or Cinderella's coach.
Yeah. Or Cinderella's coach.
Yeah.
We'd like to think first class, but the realism is it's whatever the show can afford.
And when you're travelling, what's the one thing you can never leave without?
My phone. There's a joke in the office. I have a sign above my door that says phone, wallet, keys, because inevitably one of those three things that I can't do without, I will leave behind somewhere. So, but yeah, phone probably.
Are you a morning or night person?
Definitely now a morning person. When I started in the industry 25 years ago, definitely a night person. And I think that's just a shift of age and family and experience.
Would you rather build something new or fix what's broken?
Fix what's broken.
Are you gut instinct or a data-driven person at Imagine?
I am gut instinct. Mrs. B is data-driven.
And that's a perfect team. Yeah, I was going to say.
That's why it works.
Are you about growth or profitability?
Growth, both personal growth and for the staff that we have around us and personally, and also for the work that we do that benefits beyond just the bottom line.
And I'm standing at a bar. What drink am I buying, Steve?
Do you know what? It depends when in the year it is. If it's in Panto time, it's a beer and a large one.
10th of December, it's a stack of beers, right? Yeah,
that's right. If it's a beach, it's a gin and tonic or a cocktail.
Good. Well, Steve, it's been an absolute pleasure. It's been great to work for Imagine for the last couple of years. I've got hopefully maybe 2 this year with Imagine.
Fingers crossed.
So fingers crossed it will be good. But it's great. I love Panto. I think it's the best art form out there. I love it. But thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today. And here's to a great season this year.
Fingers crossed. Thank you very much.
No problems. So thank you very much to Steve for joining us today on the Business Takeaway podcast and learning about the business pantomime. As I said, I've been involved with Panto a long period through my life. First Panto I worked on was about 18, 19, and I went when I was even younger. So the business of pantomime is a really interesting story, and it's not just the show you see on the stage. It's all the business and commercial parts to it. So really good to talk to Steve about that, and we wish him well with this year's shows. So thank you very much for listening to the show. If you haven't subscribed to the show, please make sure you do. Go and click that little follow button on whatever platform you're listening on. And if you have enjoyed the show, please do leave us a rating. As you'll hear on other podcasts as well, the rating really does help us grow the audience and get more guests onto the platform and onto the show. If you have enjoyed the show, please do go back and listen to our back catalogue. We've now got a good 20 or 30 episodes now in our back catalogue of previous guests. Some absolute corkers in there, and something I'm sure that all of you will find beneficial. If you have enjoyed the show as well today, do make sure you share it with your friends and family and get us out there. And of course, do find us on the social media platforms to keep informed. And there'll be some new exciting things coming over the next few weeks on those. So please do stay in touch. But thanks again for listening, and we look forward to seeing you on the next show.